Chapter 1: Echoes Beneath the Waves, the Myth That Refused to Die. There is a reason the ocean stirs something ancient within you. A reason your breath slows when you stand before the horizon, staring out into the endless blue, as if something beneath those waves is calling your name. It is not simply beauty, it is memory. Not the memory of your mind, but the resonance of your soul, remembering something it was never meant to forget. The story of Lemuria is not just a myth. It is a frequency, a lost song in the symphony of humanity's becoming. The name itself, Lemuria, carries a vibration that awakens a part of you untouched by modern history. Not taught in schools, not written in the textbooks of empire, but whispered in the gaps between dreams, echoed in the stillness of meditation, and felt in the bones of those who know without knowing why. Lemuria was not merely a landmass. It was a consciousness, a civilization so ancient, so aligned with the rhythms of Earth and cosmos, that its existence defies the linear logic of time. While Atlantis is often spoken of in the tones of grandeur and power, Lemuria hums with something more subtle. A quiet grace, a soft remembering, a collective heart that beat in harmony with the great pulse of Gaia herself. If Atlantis was the mind, Lemuria was the heart. Long before the rise of our known history, before the first dynasties carved their names into stone, Lemuria thrived across what is now the Pacific Basin. Not as a nation, but as a vast archipelago of enlightened presence. From the coastlines of present-day India and Sri Lanka to the islands of Polynesia, from the highlands of Peru to the peaks of Hawaii, the Lemurian spirit lingered, encoded in the land, the sky, and most of all in the water. Water, the great keeper of memory. Unlike stone or scroll, it does not need to be written upon. It feels. It remembers through vibration. The ocean that surrounds us today once bathed the temples of Lemuria. It flowed through crystal corridors, beneath bridges of light, around sanctuaries built not with machines, but with thought, intention, and harmonic resonance. These temples were not abandoned. They were submerged, not by catastrophe alone, but by cosmic agreement, by the rhythm of forgetting and remembering that governs all spiritual evolution. So why is the myth of Lemuria so persistent? Why does it return again and again, through different names and cultures, always beneath the surface of official history? Because it never truly vanished. It went underground, underwater, into dream, into frequency. It lives in the deep inner stirrings of those who carry its seed memory. You may be one of them. Perhaps you have felt drawn to crystals without knowing why, or heard tones, subtle, high, almost like a memory sung from inside your cells. Perhaps you have been to the ocean and felt a wave of emotion rise within you, sudden and inexplicable, as if the water itself remembered you. These are not fantasies. They are echoes, fragments of a reality that once was and, in another sense, still is. The temples of Lemuria were not just buildings. They were consciousness technologies, structures that worked with the Earth's magnetic grid, amplifying the frequencies of love, unity, and telepathic communion. The Lemurians did not speak in the way we do. Their language was energy. Their communication was direct, heart to heart, mind to mind, soul to soul. It required no translation, for it was resonance. And it is this resonance that continues to call to us. As the modern world grows noisier and more fragmented, the subtle frequency of Lemuria grows louder, not in volume, but in intensity. It calls not to the ears, but to the inner sense, the intuition, the knowing beyond logic. It arrives through synchronicity, through dreams of golden light, through encounters with strangers who seem oddly familiar, and through the aching sensation that something ancient is just beneath the surface of your awareness. Many who remember Lemuria do not know they are remembering it. They speak of being empathic, sensitive, deeply connected to animals or plants. They crave silence, nature, gentleness. They feel like strangers in a world driven by competition and noise. This is because their soul remembers a time before separation, before war, before hierarchy, when society was built not on dominance, but on resonance, not on power, but on presence. Lemuria is not a lost continent. It is a frequency waiting to be tuned into. It is encoded in your DNA, in the water you drink, in the dreams you dare to remember. And the first step in reclaiming it is this: to allow the possibility that the myth was never a myth, to feel rather than analyze, to remember rather than study, to trust the resonance within you. Because beneath the waves of the Pacific, beneath the veil of your everyday awareness, something stirs. Temple of light, a chamber of sound, a crystalline memory awakening. And if you listen closely, not with your ears, but with your inner stillness, you will hear the first chords of that forgotten song, the song of Lemuria, and it is singing for you. Chapter 2. The Crystal Temples, Atlantean echoes, or something older. There are moments in your life when you walk into a space and feel something shift inside you. The light bends differently. The air hums with a deeper rhythm and a sensation. Not quite fear, not quite memory, settles into your chest. It is as if the space itself recognizes you before you recognize it. This is what the Lemurian crystal temples were built to do. Far beneath the Pacific, veiled by time and tectonic silence, lie structures that modern instruments cannot see and mainstream narratives dare not speak of. These are not ruins in the traditional sense, shattered by war or weather, but veiled sanctuaries hidden by frequency, wrapped in veils of vibration too subtle for material eyes. The crystal temples were not of stone alone, but of consciousness encoded into crystalline form, vibrating in harmony with Earth's magnetic song. The Lemurians knew what we have forgotten: that structure is not separate from soul, and that architecture is not limited to the physical. A temple was not built to impress the eye, but to awaken the spirit. Its walls were not meant to reflect light, but to generate it. Built into mountain spines, carved into island cores, or suspended above ley lines, each temple was a tuning fork for human consciousness, and its materials were chosen not for strength, but for resonance. Quartz, selenite, tourmaline, crystals that today are sold as trinkets or talismans, once formed the very skeleton of Lemurian sacred spaces. These were not decorations, but technologies. They stored frequency, amplified intention, and created resonance fields where memory could be felt, where time folded in on itself, and where one could step beyond the veil. These temples sang. Their tones were not audible in the way we hear sound now. They pulsed through the skin, the bones, the heart. They dissolved the boundary between thought and form, between the seeker and the sought. Many who entered such a space experienced not just healing, but remembrance. They wept without cause. They spoke languages they had never learned. They saw visions of golden landscapes, violet suns, and structures of impossible beauty. These were not hallucinations. They were reconnections. It is often asked whether these temples were Atlantean in origin, whether Lemuria was a sister or a mother to Atlantis. The truth may be more complex than either narrative allows. Lemuria may not have preceded Atlantis linearly, but may have coexisted in parallel resonance, like two chords in the same cosmic symphony. Where Atlantis explored the geometry of mind, Lemuria channeled the poetry of soul. The crystal temples reflected this divergence. Atlantean structures reached upward, seeking to command the heavens. Lemurian sanctuaries curved inward, designed to remember the source. But there were bridges, times when the two civilizations met in harmony, when knowledge flowed in both directions. Certain temples, especially those near the Mariana Trench and Easter Island, bear both signatures. You can feel it in the shift between angular frequency and spiraled emotion, between the mind's command and the heart's invitation. Over time, as the vibration of the planet shifted and the denser consciousness began to take root, many of the Lemurian temples were sealed. Some were submerged by tectonic events, others by design. They were never meant to be destroyed, only hidden until the frequency of humanity rose once more to meet them. And now, as our awareness begins to expand, the call returns. Have you felt it? A dream of a glowing chamber beneath the waves, a strange longing when touching certain crystals, a pull toward sacred sites with no rational explanation. These are the ways the temples reach out. They do not speak in words. They vibrate, they summon, they remember you. And the question is not whether they are real in the material sense. The question is, can you feel them? For what Lemuria left behind was not a city, nor a doctrine, but a frequency map. A memory encoded into the earth, the oceans, and your own DNA. And somewhere beneath the surface of what you call reality, those temples are still singing. Will you remember how to listen? Chapter 3, Guardians of the Deep. Who built them and why were they hidden? Not all truths rise with the tide. Some sink deeper with each wave, settling not into oblivion, but into secrecy. Beneath the turquoise hush of the Pacific, where pressure swallows sound and light cannot reach, the guardians sleep. But they are not lost, nor are they forgotten. They are hidden by choice, by necessity, by the slow turning of a spiritual will only now beginning to lift its veil. When we speak of the guardians of Lemuria, we do not speak of statues, idols, or deities carved from stone. These guardians are not objects of worship, but intelligences, beings who chose to remain behind when the temples were sealed, who fused their awareness into the crystalline lattice of the sanctuaries themselves. They became keepers, not of stone, but of resonance. Not of relics, but of memory. In the earliest cycles of Lemurian existence, when form was light and matter was supple, these beings existed as pure frequency, luminescent, sound-born, far closer to what we might call consciousness than biology. As Lemuria became more physical, as the need for structures and language emerged, these entities adapted, not to rule but to tend, not to dominate but to hold sacred space. They became the breath within the chamber, the pulse within the crystal, the watcher within the dream. You have seen them, not with your eyes, but in your meditations, your visions, your dreams. Tall figures of fluid radiance, sometimes winged, sometimes faceless, sometimes cloaked in robes of shimmering azure or gold. They are often mistaken for angels, for extraterrestrials, for myths. But they are none of these. They are simply what remains when wisdom chooses to stay. Their purpose was never to intervene. It was to protect the frequency of the Lemurian temples until humanity could remember it again. That time, once distant, now draws near. And as it does, the guardians stir. They begin to appear to those who carry Lemurian memory in their field. Not as commands, not as prophecies, but as subtle nudges. A name you hear in a dream, a symbol that won't leave your mind, a whisper in the ocean breeze that feels like a forgotten language. Their communication is not loud. It is intimate and always accompanied by a sense of deep remembering. Why were the temples hidden? Because the world that followed Lemuria could not yet hold what they contained. As ego rose and separation became the dominant lens, as empires spread through conquest instead of connection, the temples were sealed, not just to preserve them, but to protect humanity from what it was not yet ready to carry. Power misused becomes poison. Frequency unearned becomes dissonance. The guardians knew this. They watched as Lemuria faded from the surface of memory, even as it deepened in the undercurrent of soul. They witnessed the rise of Atlantis, its brilliance and its fall. They remained steady, not judging, only holding, waiting. And now, as Earth's vibration shifts, as hearts open and minds soften, they begin to allow glimpses again. You may have already encountered a guardian in meditation, in the form of a guide who needed no name, whose presence stilled your breath and opened your chest. You may have felt them in sacred places, especially near water, or in moments of inexplicable peace. These are not accidents. These are invitations. Not everyone is meant to awaken to Lemuria in this life, but those who are will find themselves drawn again and again to the edge of the ocean, to the clarity of quartz, to the feeling that something immense and beautiful is just beyond the veil. The guardians will not push, but if you ask, they will answer not in language but in resonance. Some say these beings are not from Earth at all, that they came from the Pleiades or beyond. Others say they are Earth herself in conscious form. Perhaps both are true, for Lemuria was never bound by duality. It held the paradox of star and soil, spirit and matter, future and memory. These guardians are not fixed identities. They are roles, frequencies, states of consciousness waiting to be remembered. And now they wait for you not to believe but to feel, not to prove but to trust. to tune the inner instrument of your being to a song too ancient to be written, yet too familiar to be forgotten. The guardians of the deep have not left. They are the current beneath the wave, the hum beneath the silence, the presence that holds you in stillness when nothing else makes sense. And when the time is right, they will show you not only what was hidden, but why. Not all treasures are found in light. Some require you to dive into the dark, into the deep, into the forgotten. And it is there, beneath all noise, that the guardians of Lemuria wait, not as saviors, but as mirrors. Will you remember who you were when the world was whole? Chapter 4. The collapse of Lemuria, not a disaster, but a dimensional shift. The word collapse evokes visions of catastrophe, of fire, of floods, of mountains crumbling into the sea. But what if the fall of Lemuria was not a fall at all, but a shift? A breath inward rather than a scream outward? A turning of the page, not the burning of the book? In the deep remembering of Lemurian souls, there is no terror attached to its end, only silence, reverence, and a sacred kind of grief, like the setting of a sun that knows it will rise again. Lemuria did not end through violence or conquest. It ended through choice, not all at once and not everywhere the same, but slowly, like the tide receding from the shore, as its frequency became too high to remain tethered to the increasingly dense vibration of the collective human field. Lemuria was not destroyed. It was transmuted. This transmutation did not come from outside. There was no asteroid, no divine punishment, no enemy to fight. The shift arose from within, subtle, sacred, and orchestrated with the kind of cosmic intelligence that knows when to hold and when to release. As the consciousness of humanity began to drift away from unity and toward separation, the Lemurian way of being could no longer be sustained in the material world. And so it rose. Temples were sealed. Records were encoded into crystals and water. Sacred sites were cloaked in energy veils, hidden in frequency rather than in space. The great beings who once walked in light bodies stepped into higher planes, leaving behind only traces, glyphs, songs, energetic echoes, for future generations to discover. They did not die. They shifted. This was not an abandonment. It was a preparation. For even then, the Lemurians knew this cycle would return, that Earth would one day rise again into resonance, and that the souls who carried the Lemurian codes would awaken to their memory not as a history lesson, but as a living frequency. It was never about preserving knowledge. It was about preserving access. And what of those who stayed? Some Lemurian souls chose to remain embedded in Earth's physical grid, incarnating again and again, holding the vibration in small, quiet ways, through healing, through song, through their very presence. They became the seeders of wisdom, often unnoticed, often forgotten by history. Others merged with the crystalline and aquatic kingdoms, becoming part of the dreamtime, the hidden realms that pulse just beneath waking awareness. There are stories, and more than stories, of temples that sank not with screams, but with song, of entire communities that gathered at the shoreline not to flee, but to transmute. They did not resist the shift. They surrendered to it, walking into the water not as victims, but as travelers, as if the ocean itself was a portal and they knew exactly where it led. What modern minds might interpret as tragedy was, in truth, a ritual. The Lemurian fall was a collective choice to protect what could no longer thrive in a world turning toward fear, toward control, toward forgetting. It was not the end. It was an intermission, pause between breaths. Today we are breathing in again. The earth is rising, and with her, the codes of Lemuria are reawakening. Not as a blueprint to be recreated brick by brick, but as a frequency to be felt, remembered, embodied. You may have noticed it, a longing for community that transcends the transactional, a craving for silence amidst the noise, an intuitive knowing that there is more to this world than meets the senses. These are not new feelings. They are ancient ones resurfacing. And as they do, you are being asked not to rebuild Lemuria, but to let it live again through you, through the way you see and speak and hold presence, through your choices, through your willingness to live not from fear, but from trust, not from force, but from resonance. Lemuria never truly fell. It simply stepped out of view, waiting for the day the world would be ready to see again with the eyes of the soul. And now that day dawns. Slowly, gently it returns, not with fanfare, but with a soft, sacred remembrance that begins not in the sky or the sea, but in you. Will you meet it? Will you remember the light you once carried, and carry it again, not as a burden, but as a gift? For the collapse of Lemuria was never a loss. It was an offering, a seed planted deep in time, now beginning to bloom. And its first petal is this, the willingness to believe that the most sacred things are never truly gone, only hidden, until we remember. Chapter 5. The energy still lingers, what modern science can't explain. Even after a melody ends, its resonance continues to vibrate through the air, clinging to the walls, weaving itself into the silence. Lemuria was such a melody, a note played in the earliest symphonies of Earth's sacred history, one that still hums beneath the static of modern life. While the structures have vanished and the names have been forgotten, the energy remains, waiting not to be proven, but to be felt. Modern science has always chased truth with a net of logic, trying to capture the wind with equations and measure love in chemical reactions. But some truths live beyond the laboratory. The energy of Lemuria is one such truth. It is not seen in data charts or peer-reviewed articles, but in the way your body responds when you walk barefoot across certain lands, in the electricity that tingles along your spine in moments of deep intuition, in the dream you keep having of a place you've never been and yet remember perfectly. The vibration of Lemuria lives in the earth, in the crystalline matrix that pulses beneath tectonic plates and flows through ley lines like ancient blood. There are places where this energy gathers: Haleakala in Maui, the sacred springs of New Zealand, the crystalline mountains of Peru, the caves of the Philippines, and the sunlit depths off the coast of Japan. These are not tourist sites. They are resonance chambers, touchstones, memory fields, and those who are sensitive enough often feel it before they understand it. Scientists may call these feelings anomalies, electromagnetic hotspots, or unexplained energetic disturbances. But to those who remember, they are confirmations. validations that the Earth is not simply a rock hurtling through space, but a conscious being encoded with memory and mystery. The energy that still lingers in these places is not random. It is patterned, intentional, protective, and it interacts most clearly not with machines, but with consciousness. This is why the Lemurian codes often awaken during states of altered awareness. During dreams, meditation, emotional catharsis, or spontaneous insights, they bypass the intellect and speak directly to the soul. It is not unusual for someone to encounter Lemurian energy and find their body responding with tears, shivers, sudden peace, or an overwhelming sense of familiarity. These responses are not dramatic. They are authentic. The soul recognizes what the mind cannot name. The energy of Lemuria is not just ancient. It is intelligent. It remembers, and it calls to those whose frequencies are beginning to match its own. These are the healers, the visionaries, the empaths, the ones who feel too much and know things they were never taught. These are the modern Lemurians, not as a race or identity, but as a resonance, a way of being, a memory reawakened. You may have noticed it in your own life. A sudden urge to leave the noise of the city, to sit near water, to surround yourself with crystals, to listen more and speak less. You may have felt disconnected from a world that values speed over presence, noise over nuance. These are signs, not that you are lost, but that you are remembering. The old frequency is surfacing, and the earth is responding. Even science, as resistant as it has been, is beginning to catch the echoes. The discovery of biophotons, light particles emitted by DNA, the acknowledgement of water's memory, the exploration of quantum entanglement, which reveals that particles can influence each other instantaneously across space. These findings whisper the same truth that Lemuria once lived out loud, that reality is not separate, but interconnected, that consciousness is not a byproduct of biology, but its source. And yet, even these glimpses only scratch the surface. The energy of Lemuria was never about proving anything. It was about remembering everything, not as a concept, but as a state of being. A way of moving through the world with reverence, with resonance, with the knowing that everything, stone, stream, star, and stranger, is sacred and alive. This energy still lingers because it was never lost. It was encoded, embedded into the earth, the water, and most of all, into you. That's why you're here, reading this, feeling something stir that you can't quite explain. That stirring is the echo, the vibration, the invitation. You are not here to analyze Lemuria. You are here to feel it again, to let its frequency soften you, guide you, realign you, to walk through the world not as a stranger, but as a remembering one. For Lemuria was never just a place. It was a way, a vibration, and it still lingers in the quiet places of the earth and the silent knowing within your heart. And the next time you feel that inexplicable peace wash over you when you stand by the ocean, or when a crystal hums in your palm, or when your intuition whispers the truth before your mind can catch up, remember, you are not imagining it. You are remembering. You are returning. You are awakening what was never lost, only sleeping. and the energy welcomes you home. Chapter 6. Are you one of the remembers? There are questions that arrive not as demands, but as echoes. Whispers that stir not your intellect, but your inner silence. Am I one of them? Is not a query for the mind, but a calling felt somewhere behind the ribs, where logic thins and memory becomes mist. And if you are reading these words, if they do more than inform, if they awaken, resonate, remind, then the answer may already be stirring. The remembers are not a chosen few. They are a dispersed many, scattered like seeds across generations and geographies, hidden within ordinary lives yet carrying extraordinary frequencies. They do not wear symbols, carry titles, or seek recognition. Their lives may appear quiet, even invisible, but within, a hum persists, a pull toward what cannot be named but is always known. To be a rememberer is not to know facts about Lemuria. It is to feel its frequency move through you. It is to dream of light cities and oceanic temples, and awaken with tears you cannot explain. It is to walk into nature and feel as if you are returning to a home you never left. It is to cry at beauty, to hear music as language, to crave connection deeper than words. You may have always felt different, not better, not worse, but not quite made for the constructs of this world. Systems of dominance and division never made sense to you. You saw through them even as a child. You questioned without knowing why. You sensed things others dismissed. And though you learned to quiet these sensations, to conform where needed, something always remained. A truth beneath the surface, waiting. This truth is not something you find. It is something you uncover, layer by layer, choice by choice. It is remembering that you are not broken, but designed for another way of being, one rooted not in scarcity, but in sufficiency, not in separation, but in wholeness, not in fear, but in resonance. The world has conditioned you to forget, to prioritize logic over intuition, noise over silence, productivity over presence. But the remembers are being activated, not by force, but by frequency. And the signs are subtle. Synchronicities increasing, time behaving strangely, a sudden pull towards spiritual practices, ancient texts, the ocean, the stars. You may be called to change your life in ways that defy explanation. To leave relationships, jobs, cities, not out of escape, but in service of alignment. You may feel urges to create, to speak, to heal, to rest. You may find yourself waking in the middle of the night with insights or heartache. This is not madness. It is metamorphosis. To remember is not to escape this world. It is to become fully present in it as the frequency of Lemuria reactivates through you. You are not here to rebuild the old. You are here to become the new, to carry the codes of harmony, of unity, of crystalline clarity, not by teaching, but by embodying. Each time you choose compassion over judgment, presence over distraction, gentleness over control, you are remembering. Each time you listen instead of speak, walk barefoot instead of scroll, feel instead of think, you are remembering. Each time you bless your water, thank the earth, honor your body, you are remembering. And this remembering is not solitary. As you awaken, you will begin to find others. strangers who feel like soul family, conversations that skip small talk and dive into soul truths. You will begin to reweave the web of Lemurian consciousness across the globe, not as an organization, but as a vibration. Not with temples of stone, but with temples of being. So if your heart has ached with a longing you couldn't name, if your dreams have spoken in symbols you couldn't decode, if your intuition has grown louder despite your doubt, know this: you are not broken. You are being called, not to believe in Lemuria, but to remember it. Because the myth was never a fiction. It was a message, planted deep in time, now blooming through you. The ancient is not behind us. It is within us, waiting. And the final initiation is simple: to stop waiting for a sign and realize you are the sign. So ask not whether you are one of the remembers. Ask instead, what will you do now that you remember?